Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children over the age of 18, it's your main man Tez, as well as Travis, and we are your favorite LOs. And on this edition of Terminology Tuesdays, we're going to talk about two terms that are close, but not really, right? We're going to talk about cash to close as well as cash reserves, all right? So go ahead, grab that pen and a piece of paper and your favorite beverage, and we'll be back in a second to talk about the two terms. See you in a few. All right, folks, welcome back. And as we said in the intro, we're going to talk about two terms dealing with cash today, all right, when the closing process. First is going to be cash to close, and the second is going to be cash reserves. All right, so go ahead. I'm going to go ahead and softball pitch this one up because it's pretty simple to break down, Travis, for you. But tell the kind folks what exactly is cash to close.
Cash to close will be a line item on your loan estimate and your closing disclosure. And it's exactly how it sounds. That's the cash you need to bring to close. So that's going to be made up of a couple of different things. You're going to see some debits and credits. They're going to add up to that. One of the biggest pieces of your cash to close will always be your down payment. Okay. I always tend to steer my clients to look at the cash to close and try not to get lost in the woods as far as, closing costs versus down payment versus appraisal versus this versus that. Because at the end of the day, the thing that matters most to my clients is how much money do I have to bring to the table, Travis? So many times you see someone that's like, oh my gosh, my cash to close is X. I thought my down payment was just supposed to be Y%, right? So that's why we talk a lot of times in terms of cash to close. That's going to be your total outlay, the money that you're going to bring to the closing table. Okay. Now, in many transactions, that's going to be made up of your down payment. It's going to be made up of your closing costs. Okay. I know we're probably going to have so many videos out there going into closing costs. We're not going to get too deep in those. All right. So appraisal fees, title fees, any origination fees if you're working with a lender that charges those, application fees if you're working with a lender that charges those. Sometimes there's a chunk of your private mortgage insurance that's paid up front. Sometimes there's government fees for FHA loans, VA loans, USDA loans, all of our government products. And then, of course, you're going to have some of the things that you've already paid for in advance. So if I've given an earnest money deposit or a due diligence deposit, those items are going to be taken out of my cash to close and credited to me. Okay, so cash to close, quite simply, in the simplest of terms, is the check that you are bringing to close or the wire that you are sending to the title company at close to get the keys in your hand. I know that's probably a lot coming at you fast and furious. Tez, is there anything there that I, breezed over that I shouldn't have, or anything that I just flat out missed?
No, I think you kind of surmised it. And like Travis said, it's a bunch of different nuances that we can talk about hours as far as like certain fees that will be a part of the cash to close. But as you said, it's typically the amount that you bring to the closing table via a check or a wire. Only thing I'm going to add is, folks, don't, when it comes to the check, cashier's check or certified check, or a wire transfer, whatever the title company or closing attorney prefers. You do, some title companies or attorneys have a certain dollar amount that once it hits that threshold, you can't use a check, you have to wire. So that's the only thing I would add. Don't bring a suitcase full of cash because that's only going to open up another case of worms for your loan officer to the closing table. And preferably probably.
But Tez, it's called cash to close.
I know, but it's not literally the cash. So
It's not called check to close, Tez.
hey, I understand, Travis, and I understand the directness of the actual word usage, but in the time that we live in now, either bringing a check or a wire is probably what's preferred by the title company. So, yeah, folks, don't take it literal. Okay, so that's the only thing I would add in regards to cash to close. The next thing that we're going to talk about, and the last one, and I'll probably be brief too, folks, and that's going to be the cash reserves. So basically, cash reserves are just as they sound, or they have another word called mortgage reserve, right? And it's basically the rainy day savings that you set aside in case of emergencies, right? Such as a loss of a job. So when lenders, they typically, not always, sometimes require like 2 months of mortgage payments on hand as an emergency. And it's simply just to strengthen the profile of the client when they're actually purchasing a mortgage, right? So long story short, like cash reserves are just basically rainy day funds. And depending on the actual loan type that you buy, those reserves change, right? So when it comes to buying a second home, the reserves that I just spoke, maybe 4 months, right? Because now you're having a first home, a primary home, and a second home that you plan on living on. So the lender might know that, want to know that you have enough funds to cover two mortgages for a certain period of time. And then when you're actually buying investment properties, that even gets higher, right? I know some lenders, they want to see at least 6 months reserves on all the properties that you have, right? So for those people who have investment portfolios, they probably already know that. But for the people who don't or are looking to start, it's kind of a glimpse into that world in terms of what actual cash reserves are. So cash reserves, ladies and gentlemen, long story short, rainy day funds to cover the mortgage should anything happen in the future. So, I mean, I think I broke that down pretty solid, Travis. Let me know, did I miss anything when it comes to the cash reserves?
I mean, huge shout out to TikTok for having everyone in the world thinking that they can go buy 7 investment homes with no money in their pocket and no money in their bank and all that other stuff. Okay. Which some of it's true, guys. But I think what we all have to understand is that most often, like the dirtiest secret in what we do is that 99% of the underwriting that is done is truly done by a computer. Okay, so most often when I'm dealing with clients where I'm encouraging them to show reserves, it's just to strengthen the profile, like Tez said. We want to make sure that we're putting you in a spot to succeed. And I have had loans that, for whatever reason, the underwriting systems don't care for the profile. But if we add in, let's just say it's your own retirement account at work, one that you're not even planning on liquidating, it can take a file from a no to a yes. Okay, so when we're dealing with those reserves, we're most often dealing with just strengthening the profile. Okay, one of the biggest misconceptions that I get from people when it comes to reserves is quite simply that, like, it has to be money in my bank that I could go get out if I needed it, right? And oftentimes it doesn't have to be. It also doesn't have to be stocks, bonds, investments, things of that nature. It can be checking, it can be savings, right? It can be a mix of all of those. But just keep in mind, if your trusted loan advisor talks to you about funds, quite often we're not just talking about your down payment, right? Nobody wants to use all of their cash to close that we talked about earlier and have nothing left in their bank account, right? The underwriting systems hate that. Okay, so that's why that reserve is always going to be a strengthening factor. Now, Tez, I think you hit on it. Investment homes, different property types are going to have different requirements. Check with your trusted loan advisor. Check with them, see if it's necessary. I mean, I've had people that have, shown tons of money in reserves and we haven't really needed it. And I've had others where people are a little bit hesitant because, like, oh, well, I'm not using that money for my 401k, so why should I send, Tez and Travis a copy of that? Well, the answer is that if we put those numbers into that computer system, sometimes it gives us a better answer, right?
So that's a great point, Travis. And I think, ladies and gentlemen, that's going to wrap us up for this edition of Terminology Tuesday. So, as always, if you found this information to be helpful, please hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, as well as the bell notification so you're always up to date on whenever we drop this knowledge that you need to get the deed. But with that being said, I'm Tez, and that's Travis again, and we are your favorite LOs. Till next time, folks. See ya.